The Republic of Korea is hosting an inaugural summit for African countries and other related international organizations. Delegations from 48 African nations, including 25 heads of states, are attending. Africa's rich mineral resources and its potential as a vast export market are at the top of the agenda. Agreements aimed at laying the groundwork for trade and investment are expected to be signed with several countries, which will help establish the administrative foundation for free trade and advanced customs management. Now, according to President Yoon Suk-yeol's Deputy National Security Advisor, Africa is a crucial partner for South Korea, to further its industrial advances and cooperation with Africa. This is not an option, but a necessity. Since Friday, the president has held meetings with leaders of around 10 African countries, including Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Togo, Rwanda, and Mozambique. Tanzania, for instance, has signed to borrow £2.5 billion over the next 5 years from South Korea through concessional loans, while Ethiopia signed a $1 billion financing deal over 4 years for infrastructure, science and technology, as well as health and urban development. What are the pros and cons of these summits for Africa? How sustainable, we can't not talk about it, these loans that seems non-ending. For more perspective, international business development expert and lead consultant at 3T Impacts Consulting, Bamidele Ayemibo, joins us. Thanks for giving us your time. All right, before we talk about the relevance of this summit and whatnot, I couldn't resist wondering, when you hear President William Ruto complain about how African leaders are summoned to these summits, one would expect some restraint in attendance or some move to show that, okay, this is getting a little bit too much. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Ruto, along with over 20 other heads of states, are currently at the summit. I'm yet to hear, for instance, Africa-EU summit or Kenya-US summit. Have you? And what's your thinking about African leaders attending these summits?
It's all about economic development. It's all about growth. If you are not productive, if you need help, you cannot resist that kind of invitation. So I'm not surprised that African countries are not able to, because a number of African countries need help, not because we can't help ourselves, by the way, but because we put ourselves in a situation where we perpetually need help, because we've not looked inward to be able to find a way to help ourselves, because that same thing we are going there to get, we can actually get it right here from home. So, but I'm not surprised, and it will be difficult to resist because a lot of money will be thrown around, and politicians, for who they are, it's an opportunity for some of them also to pocket some of this money, and that make it attractive for them to. They'll be there for 3, 4, 5 years, 8 years, and after that, they won't be there again. So they don't even have to worry themselves about how it's going to pay. So as far as they're concerned, it's an opportunity for them because the continent has put itself in a situation where the whole world, China has done it, Russia has done it, US has done it, different countries are doing it because we are putting ourselves in a situation where we need that help. And they want to help, but of course, they always have something up their sleeve whenever they bring that help to them.
But isn't it worrying, really? Leadership is about setting examples. And at one point, not specifically about President Ruto now, but leaders will say, this is concerning for us. We should think in words, like you said, all our potentials are in here. We can invite them over, as against us always having to go. Doesn't that worry you about the attraction that they now bring from this summit, the benefits for the continent? It waters it down significantly, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Like I said, it's also about capacity and the thinking of the leadership we have chosen for ourselves. So, for example, if you look at this particular summit, it's mainly focused towards natural resources. African-owned natural resources. But Africa have not used its own resources to exploit those natural resources to its own advantage, but rather waiting for someone to make funds available for them to be able to exploit it and then be able to have an exchange. Look at Nigeria, for example. Even the crude oil that Nigeria is getting, it's not Nigeria doing it. Is IOC doing it in Nigeria and giving Nigeria part of it from what the federal government get the revenue is expected? Why can't that be done ourselves? Why do we need these people to come and do it for us? That's exactly the challenge I'm talking about. Okay. And that's the thinking of a lot of African leaders that have led us to where we are right now.
I really needed to get that off my chest because I've had this conversation about, U.S. Africa Forum, U.S. this, U.S. Whatever country. But it is imperative that we have conversations like this. And, I mean, on the flip side of the divide, South Korea is saying partnership is not even a choice. I mean, partnership with Africa is not even a choice, but a necessity. Explain, if you can, the importance of the framing of Africa as a crucial partner if South Korea is to further its industrial advances.
China is the factory of the world. India is the pharmacy of the world. Africa is the farming or farmers of the world and miners of the world. So they understand the fact that Africa has a lot of potential that we are not harnessing, and they need those potential to partake in it. And that's why. So it's a necessity, not just for South Korea, for many countries in the world to partner with Africa. And that's why you see a lot of initiative from the US and China and even the EU, because Africa has 1.3 billion people, almost 1.4 billion people. That's a very huge market. But unfortunately, now look at why South Korea can do this to Africa. South Korea GDP is about 1.7 trillion. 1.7 trillion. The population is 52 million people. So their per capita GDP is about 32,000. But look at Africa. African population is about 1.4 billion. But African GDP is about 3 trillion. 3 trillion. If you divide that and you find per capita, is 2,200. Now, this is a small country, 52 million. One country having about 1.7 trillion GDP. And if you look at the export of South Korea alone, as a country of 52 million people, is over $700 billion. But export of the whole of Africa put together, it's just about $600 billion. So they have all it takes to be able to summon us. And that's why they can do that. And the only reason, because they know we need them, even though they need us more.
I guess we'll have to ask now, what is in this partnership for Africa? We know that South Korea is the world's largest energy buyer and the 5th largest automaker, making for a push for electrification. What is in it for Africa, really?
No, there's a lot in it for Africa. The only painful part for me is that Africa might not be getting the total value. Now, if you look at what the summit is about, if you look at the mineral sector, the demand of South Korea alone, the total import as of 2022 is about 270 billion. When you look at the raw minerals plus the processed one together, about 270 billion. That is the market that Africa wants to tap into. That is the market that Africa has to be part of. That is one of the reasons why Africa should consider it, to be part of it. However, now, what makes this interesting for me is majority of the mineral purchase. Now, out of the 270 billion demand for mineral product, about 220 billion is raw, in the raw form. About 50 billion is processed, like lead ingot, metals, for example, instead of the iron ore or lead ingot, zinc ore to zinc ingot. So, processed to a secondary level, not tertiary level. So the demand for that is low, but they are buying a lot of raw. So there's opportunity for us to sell the raw. The only challenge is that we will not be getting the full value of what we could have benefited if we are adding value to those things.
I wanted you to land before I push that part of the submission you made. Why can't Africa get the full benefit? What can they do to get the full benefit? Because what's the point if we continue to go to this summit and we just get piecemeal while the host countries get more?
There's something about government in Africa. It's like the more you look, the less you see. We are already doing something let's look at Nigeria. We're doing something with the IOC that we can replicate in the mineral sector. So, for example, the oil major are going to drill, get out the crude oil, sell, and we have a sharing formula for whatever it is they get out. Why can't we do that for iron, for coal, for other mineral, for lead, for zinc, for other mineral? We can do it because we have a model already working. We're not going to invent anything. What is not clear to me is why the African government needs someone to come and do this for them. I mean, so because this is something we can do ourselves, and I'm not just saying we should do it because for crude here, we do the crude and then we send it out and bring it refined. We should also process it. There are Nigerian processing lead in Nigeria. There are a Nigerian company processing lead right now. The only challenge is that for the lead, for the zinc, for the aluminium, and the mineral processed in Nigeria, majority, probably 80-90%, are owned by foreigners. Now, that's what government need to begin to consider. So how do we empower our own people and the few people doing it to be able to get more businesses to be able to add value to this thing on the African continent? Because that is where we will now get the value. But like I said, it look like it's not rocket science, but the politicians make it seem like it's rocket science. Because this is something that can be done and be done elsewhere. But we're not doing it.
Bamidele, it doesn't matter what the problem is. It just seems that at the heart of our challenge is leadership. I don't know whether we can get it right. Now, there's another part that I want to talk about. Tanzania has already signed an agreement to borrow 2.5 billion over the next 5 years. And then we have Ethiopia has signed a $1 billion financing deal over 4 years as well. Most analysts argue that the loans are becoming unsustainable. What's your expert view on the balance ratio of gains for both parties?
Loan by itself is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with taking facilities or loan particularly from countries like this. What is wrong for me is what the money is being used for. Because we can get that loan in Africa and it can be used to develop that sector, to develop the infrastructure needed to mine in that sector. And you know what will happen? At the end of the day, that will pay back, because what will be generated as a result of this, what the loan is used for, can pay back the loan. But that's not what happens in Africa. And that's why people are always worried about Africans taking loans and there's nothing really to show for it. As if we are just taking the loan and some people are stealing it or it's being used for consumption. So the issue for me is not the loan, is exactly what the loan is being used for. Let's hope that this will be used to develop that sector so that by itself, the facility can pay back itself because of the kind of infrastructure that is resulting from that sector as a result of the investment of the government from the funds that have been collected from these countries.
Yeah, in my previous conversation before you came on, Felisa suggested the creating of a secretariat to monitor commitment made at the G20 summit that South Africa will be chairing in that year. And I'm thinking, is it possible to replicate such an idea? When loans are taken, we have such secretariats committed to ensuring that the loans are utilized for the purposes to check and balance these leaders, for instance. Might that be a suggestion that is worth reviewing?
I think there shouldn't be a law that for every loan being taken, it should be matched to a project, and then that loan should not be handled by the federal government, but rather a committee that involves private sector to ensure that as the fund come in, is channeled to what is meant for immediately. So I agree totally with that in form of secretariat, but I don't want something hard up. I would rather prefer a bill for an act that entrench that within the system, so that you can't just take loan, you match it to a project, and there's a committee set up by that law that will implement and ensure that loan is used for exactly the reason for which it was borrowed. So I'm very much in line, because whatever we need to do to ensure that we don't just take this loan and the money just disappear into the wind, but that the fund is being used for exactly what it was borrowed for, so that the dividend can come to the nation, to the people, so that the loan can be self-sustaining. Of course, it's what we need in Africa.
Okay, let's also talk about the other loan, two accords, Tanzania also signed 2 accords. I don't know what you call accords in real term.
Agreement, actually.
On Korean use of its ocean resources and minerals used in clean energy technologies. What does this kind of partnership do for the push for climate change? And does such extraction have any downsides for the country and the continent at large? And if that is the case, what measures are needed to ensure sustainable and responsible resource extraction?
I mean, for this kind of project, an environmental impact assessment needs to be done because there must be serious monitoring of what this mining activity will do to seabed ecosystem disturbance, to the protection of biodiversity of the ocean ecosystem, and more importantly, to prevent and control pollution. People are already doing it. I mean, a number of the oil are drilled from inside the sea, and a number of countries are doing it in a way that they have there will still be minimal impact on the environment. So, because this is Africa, and you know Africa, anything goes. So, what I'm not sure of is if this is being put in place to ensure that at the end of the day, you don't get this money, this activity is going on, the money taken, we can't see the impact, the environment is left more devastated than where it was before. So, strict monitoring on the environmental impact assessment and the control put in place to minimize as much as possible, I think is something that must be done in this regard. Considering the fact that everybody is talking about the need to protect the environment as much as possible. And this kind of activity will definitely affect the environment. What we can only do is to minimize the impact as much as possible.
All right. Considering the vast wealth of South Korea, you've highlighted that recently. What specifics would you expect to be on the agenda for Africa at this summit?
I would rather Africa negotiate an agreement where they don't just come here to mine, they also process into secondary products, from lead to lead ingot, from zinc to zinc ingot, from aluminum to aluminum ingot, to secondary product at the minimum before they are shipped out, so that we will get more value in terms of earnings on those products, but more importantly is the impact it will have on job creation and poverty eradication on the African continent.
All right, we've talked about loans already, but I want us to speak a little more broadly on the success of whatever partnership that's going to come out from this summit. How can it be measured, and what are the potential long-term consequences for both South Korea and the continent?
And that question is very important. We shouldn't just go for this summit. We should also be able to say, okay, we went for this summit. This is the result. This is the outcome. Based on the agreement, number one, when are we going to start? What are for the case of Tanzania, you highlighted nickel, lithium, graphite, and items that will be mined. What do we stand to benefit from this? So that at the end of the day, when this project starts, we can then begin to measure. Look, we anticipated or estimated that we are going to get this. What did we get at the end of the day? In terms of job creation, in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of earning for the country or for the continent, as many countries that are interested in this and have had that kind of agreement. So, and the reason for monitoring this is so that if you are going to do another one in future, we should know, okay, we've done China, we've done Russia. What is the status of those agreements right now? What have we done with the whatever we are getting in terms of support, in terms of grant, in terms of loan? What is the impact? What did we do wrongly? What can we do differently so that we can look forward and begin to correct errors that we made in the past that have not made us to enjoy the benefit of all this summit and the agreement that we've had? And money is coming in, but we don't see the results. So I think strict monitoring becomes very important to ensure that this time around, this gives a very serious dividend or measurable impact and result for all the countries that have gone and have signed an agreement and is expecting one level of partnership or the other with South Korea. And by the way, I think it shouldn't be just about this, because, I mean, even though what is taking them there is on the minerals, but not all African countries have that advantage. Some are a lot better with agriculture. So what are you going to do about that also? Can you take a look on the opportunity and potential of agri within the South Korean and see if that also can be another area we can begin to consider beyond just the mineral. So it should be holistic, even though what is taking the leader there, it has to do with the mineral, the demand for mineral in that country.
I'll throw this one in because of the place of technology, and South Korea has expertise here in areas like electronics and automotive manufacturing. How can they complement Africa's natural resources? And for you, what would be, for lack of a better word, some joint projects that we should envision from this summit?
We should really consider intercontinental value chain. You know, for example, you have a lead ore mine in Africa. Let's say, for example, in Nigeria, in southeast Ebonyi State, the lead is moved to China. The lead is converted to ingot. The ingot is moved to Germany, used to produce battery. The battery is moved to the US and put inside the Ford motor cars, and the Ford motor cars is back into Nigeria. That's intercontinental value chain in which different countries participated and added value, which was why I said, if we are mining in Africa, let's also move it to the secondary level in Africa. Then it can be moved to South Korea, where it's used to produce a product that can be part of other cars in other countries, or even part of the car they will be manufacturing there. So at the end of the day, because that then become more sustainable. Because then you are creating a lot of value here in Africa, but it's also benefiting them because then they are able to get what they need to be able to produce what they need to manufacture, or that they manufacture. We are not taking it to the final state. We are taking it to the secondary state. They're taking the final state. Both parties have a measure of value from this. I think this intercontinental value chain is what we need. And besides, that also should happen in Africa. That's the whole essence of the AFCFTA. Intracontinental value chain also.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for speaking with us. We appreciate the insights that you have provided.
Thank you very much for having me.
And as always, dear viewer, thank you for your kind attention while the program lasted. I hope to see you same time next week. Bye for now.